Whether you're new to CSS or you've worked on the front end of the web for years, there's every chance you've heard of and probably also used a CSS reset or a CSS normalizer. In many tools and frameworks and project templates, CSS resets are a standard feature, but it's worth asking the question, should we be normalizing or resetting our CSS? And should you be normalizing and resetting your CSS? So let's take a look at why these tools exist first. If you open a semantic HTML document without any CSS in the browser, you'll notice something interesting. Even though you provided no styling, the document has styling. There are different heading levels, block quotes, and figures are indented. There are table styles. Things are presented in a reasonable way in the browser. This is because the browser has a built-in style sheet called a user agent style sheet or just user agent styles, and those styles are there to style unstyled content, which makes sense since unstyled content should still be presented in a reasonable way in the browser. Now, there are two challenges here from a web development standpoint. Number one, these user agent styles are opinionated and don't necessarily match with our intentions, so we have to override them with our own styles. And number two, there are slight differences between the different user agent styles in different browsers. I urge you to take this HTML document that's sitting in the exercise files and open it in multiple different browsers and scroll through it. And you'll notice that even though it looks roughly the same, there are some slight inconsistencies between the browsers, which are worth knowing about. CSS resets and normalizers were introduced to fix this problem, and they did that by overriding all user agent styles, so you started with an absolute clean slate. The first CSS reset I'm aware of was the one that was created by Eric Meyer way back in the day. And now he has updated his reset several times, and while the old reset truly reset the entire browser so you had no user agent styles, the new reset is a lot more, shall we say, rational and careful, so it doesn't override everything. This reset is the classic reset that people are using. A more modern reset is called normalize, and this is one you'll find in a lot of templates and projects and things that you download. Normalize is also more careful in how it approaches things. You can see it's currently in version 8, so it continuously evolves and tries to provide a more reasonable alternative to a hard reset. In addition, we now have a third option, which is called CSS Remedy. Now, CSS Remedy is very different from the normalize and CSS reset, because instead of trying to reset styles in the browser, CSS Remedy says, what is the actual intention of each of these elements? What should they display like if HTML and CSS were working properly? And then the remedy tries to set all the elements to display the way they were intended to be displayed had the specification been read properly. It's kind of funny since it's developed by a lot of the people who write the specification and implement the specification. So you have three very different approaches here, and they fall into basically the three different factions within the should we be applying CSS resets to our projects or not debate. The three factions are, number one, those who believe normalizing and resetting CSS is the best solution and should be done all the time. Number two, those who believe building on top of the user agent styles is the best solution. And number three, those who believe fixing user agent styles to match the original intent of the specification is the right solution. Where do I land on this? I am verging very closely to CSS Remedy or no reset at all, because I've realized that I'm introducing a lot more CSS than I need to by trying to reset things. But different developers fall in different categories and different communities fall in different categories. So what I've done here for you is set up a test environment where you can test these CSS resets and see what they do to your page. In the exercise files, you'll find a document called index.html. And at the top here, you can see we have calls for different resets. So I have the reset that Eric Meyer created. I have the current version of normalize, and I have the current version of remedy. And if you want to see the effect of any one of these, you can simply uncomment one of these links. This is the reset. Remember I said a full reset literally resets everything, so you have no pre-configured styles at all. So everything looks the same here, which is very useful if you want to start from scratch, but it can also be absolutely not what you want. It all depends, because by doing this full reset, you're also introducing a lot more work for yourself. Normalize is more careful. So when I apply normalize, you'll notice it looks similar. There are some changes. It's actually a good idea to do a side-by-side comparison here to see what normalize does. And remedy is even more subtle. So remedy makes some small stylistic changes and introduce more consistency and does things like remove the margin around the body. It makes images into block level elements, and it does other things that you would expect or you would have to do manually anyway. But like I said, they're all very different. So now that you have this document, if you find a CSS remedy or reset or normalize you want to use, I encourage you to dump it into this document, which has every possible HTML element, and then see what that reset does to your content before you start using it. This becomes your test bed for resets.